Hey everyone, my name is Wes, and welcome back to another episode of Terror Talk where I discuss creepy clips online. I created this original horror music to add to the video, and I hope you enjoy it. Be sure to leave your own comments, and when you're done watching, check the description if you'd like to listen to my music without the commentary. Now let's get into it and have some fun.
Story took place when I was in the Air Force and stationed in Louisiana. I won't mention the name of the base, but I'm sure that there are many people out there who will know which one it is once I make mention of some of the details to this story. This story took place a few years after I had been stationed there. I first arrived to this base in 2006, and upon my arrival, I, along with many other new troops, were greeted with many different stories of horror. There were stories about a man in a top hat who walked a dark, long and narrow dirt road on the outskirts of a storage facility area. There was another story about a crazy man who was hit by a patrol car and ran off into the woods next to the same place. But my story relates to a separate story that was told to me.
Do you have a horror story related to the military? I respect anyone in the military. Thank you for your service if you have been in the military, but I could never be in the military. That is not my thing. But if you have a particular horror story related to the military, let me know below. I'm very curious to hear people's experiences, especially when it's related to scary stuff like this.
It was my second night on shift, as I recall. I was posted with an airman who had been there for several years. He gave a rundown about some little girl who had been visiting her father when the storage area we were working in was being constructed, which was well before any of our time. The story went that that little girl was playing on some of the structures while her father was working, but had fallen to her death by slipping off the edge at the top of the structure itself. Most of the story didn't make sense to me at the time, but regardless of the facts, it still scared the shit out of me.
Isn't that sad? Like, that just goes to show that you gotta keep an eye on your kids, especially in dangerous spots like construction sites or things of that nature.
To make matters worse, the airman had taken me to the exact place where the supposed story took place. He would shut off the engine and turned off the music as we just sat there in silence. He startled me a few times, but nothing ever happened. Now, skip forward about 3 years. I was scheduled to work that particular spot of the base this night. Keep in mind that I'd been visiting this spot for years now, but at this point, the storage area had been completely closed down except for a few minor areas, which required us to do physical drive-thrus and checks of this area. The shift itself started out rather shitty. Me and my Alpha, aka partner, had been given a cattle truck to do this patrol, as our normal vehicle was in the shop for maintenance. Yeah, I'm not kidding, a cattle truck. I know this part doesn't seem very important to the story at the moment, but it will tie into the story eventually. So to save on time, let's skip forward a few hours. We were scheduled to do 3 random checks of the storage facility that night, and we had already completed 2 of the 3 prior without any issues. So come about 4 o'clock in the morning, we decided to do our last check, seeing as all the maintenance guys had went home for the night in this area. The only way to access the area was with 2 very large separate gates, which took forever to open. We pile in, lock the gates behind us, and continue on our way. My Alpha was driving during this check, and I was the spotter who used the flashlight to check the lock on each structure. An important detail that I left out, which may be necessary here, is that the story of the little girl had taken place on a road within the storage area, which we called Echo Street. By this point, everything was fine, and we had finished our rounds. My Alpha...
I'm just curious, do you believe in spirits or ghosts? Let me know in the comments below. I definitely do. And I actually have a quick story about it myself. So I was visiting an apartment complex with my friend one night, and he said that he saw shadow people, and I asked him if he could show me a shadow person. And so it was an empty building, there was absolutely no one in it, and I looked behind the glass, and there was absolutely no one there, and he told me to lean up my ear against the glass, and he stood several feet behind me with his phone out. And I put my ear to the glass, and I heard a tapping on the other side. And I was like, no way. And I looked behind the glass, absolutely no one there. There was no way that he could have been trying to prank me. I put my ear up against it again, and the tapping got louder, was even louder this time. And so I was flabbergasted. And so I went back to my friend, and he showed me a picture of a silhouette of a person, basically, that was behind the glass tapping on the window. And the face was very shadowy and had deep sunken eyes, and I'll never forget the picture. But when we went back to his apartment and we looked at the picture again, it had blacked out, almost as if the spirit had gotten rid of it. So that is my creepy ghost story. If you have one, please share it in the comments below.
What makes the final turn down Echo Street? We had both been pretty talkative during most of the night, when we were just shooting the shit, when I got an uneasy feeling. Something felt different, but I couldn't make out what it was. We were about halfway down the road when things became almost completely and frighteningly silent. Even the rumble of our cattle truck and the faint noise of the radio playing seemed to become less audible. As we approached the structure from my previous story, and I must stress at this point that even telling or typing this part still brings a chill down my spine and makes my eyes tear up in fear. But as we approached the structure itself, I turned my head to the outside of the window opposite of the structure, and out of my left ear, I hear a sound that nearly caused me to piss myself. It was the sound of a person groaning or moaning in distress, sort of like the moan of the girl from The Grudge. Yes, I'm very serious. The faint, creepy moan begins to ring inside the cab of the truck between the two of us, in between the dark emptiness of the middle seat. I feel my blood turn cold, and I quickly turn to my alpha and yell, "Dude, cut that shit out." My alpha turns to me with a confused look on his face. At this point, he begins to take his foot off the accelerator and...
Oh my god, what would you do if you heard a sound like that? Listening to that sound just now literally gave me goosebumps because, oh, I couldn't even imagine if I heard a sound like that.
asks, "Am I going too fast?" I remain silent for a moment with my hand in a pausing gesture, and I listen. I hear the noise again. My partner interrupts and asks, "What's wrong?" I quickly turn the music off without saying anything at first, and then I whisper to him, "Do you hear that?" He stops the truck in confusion and listens closely. It was almost dead silent for a second or two when we both hear it this time. That long, chilling groan of a woman. It echoed in my ears. It sounded like someone was struggling to breathe and taking in a giant breath of air while someone was trying to strangle them. The sound was beyond terrifying, and the fact that I wasn't the only one hearing it only made it more of a horrifying experience. I found myself beginning to ask him my original question again, but he quickly interrupts and says with a strong sound of fear in his voice, "What the f*** is that?" We stupidly waited to see if we could hear it again. The rumble of the gates on the back of the truck are easily heard and recognized as they made a sort of metal-on-metal clatter, and the diesel engine has that typical rumble as well. But in between both the noises, we heard it again for the final time. That groan. It sounded even louder, but this time, it sounded like it was coming from both inside and outside of the truck. Like we were being surrounded by whatever was making that noise of distress. Without even making a peep,
That is crazy that the sound was coming from the inside and the outside of the truck, wasn't it? Like, holy cow.
Alpha puts the truck in drive, and he hauls our asses off that street quicker than I have ever gone on any other street in that entire base. He nearly flips the truck going around a curve, but it doesn't bother us one bit. We were both in an unspoken agreement that we wanted to get out of there quickly. We got to the two gates again, and I hopped out of the truck as fast as I could. My alpha watched my back as I quickly opened both gates. He jumped back into the driver's seat, sped out, and waited for me to close both gates as well. Once we completed that task, we quickly returned to the main part of the base, and we requested to meet with our flight chief to tell him what had happened. When we finally met up with him, we expected him to think that we were both full of shit, or that we had just imagined the entire thing, being as it was so late into our 12-hour shift, and we were both tired. But I clearly remember him saying to the both of us, "I completely believe you." As a matter of fact, I had something like that happen to me twice, once in that same place, and the other in that building behind you, as he points at our jailhouse. Again, I know that sounds completely cliche with that grudge-like moan we had heard, but it honestly happened, and it still brings those tears of fright into my eyes every time I tell it. I went back to that storage area only once after that, but I never went down that road again, and I never went after dark.
Yeah, this is a pretty crazy story. And I think that just goes to show you that there is stuff out there. And for anyone to say that ghosts aren't real, spirits aren't real, I think is kind of crazy in my opinion, because there are just too many encounters, too many stories of that kind of stuff. I mean, even my story is pretty crazy, isn't it? The one that I told earlier. Because I just think that there has to be some type of spiritual world out there. And who's to say that spirits don't try to come visit us? But anyways, I thought this was a cool story. And I hope you enjoyed my commentary and the music. And I will see you in the next video.